Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. This episode is taking on three things we have yet to tackle on this show: mental fitness, masculinity, and plant medicine. Neal Conlon is joining to share about his journey from Marine veteran to corporate to startups and cybersecurity technology to what he is calling his own personal development reset. In all of that, he has had one core purpose: to create and provide safety and security for others. Neal is wildly transparent on the show and in his social media about his experiences in this thing we call life. The good, the bad, the really bad, and the successes that come when you pick yourself up and press forward. I know that you are going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and so let's get to it. Neal, welcome to One Spark Stories. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm recording this from my truck, which I love to do sometimes. It's like the mobile office. I'm off to see clients today, and excited that we get to do this today together.
Yes, and thank you so much for the time, especially while you're out on the go. And it's funny, I think about, even 2-3 years ago, how normal it has become having conversations in cars, right? It's become our new way. We're like, well, why can't I take the show on the road? So I appreciate you joining from there. And it's funny, we have a mutual connection, Hannah Chapman, who has been on the show. And when Hannah first mentioned you, she was like, oh, you've got to connect with Neal. He's got a lot of similar things. And I look and I'm like, okay, cybersecurity, U.S. Marine Corps. I'm missing something, Hannah, because I was a Disney cast member, an educator. But as I dug deeper, you're a visionary. You are a purpose-driven, passion-driven person who is now venturing a lot into the personal wellness and personal, spiritual, whatever type of growth that means. So I would just love to dig deeper into that. But first, here from you today, who is Neal today? Who are we meeting? And just a quick little overview.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been a journey. It really has. And one of the things I think I've learned over the past dozen or so years is that a lot of times the thing that we think we're working on is not really the thing we're going to end up working on. And you're absolutely right? Like, I grew up in New York City, in Queens, and initially went into the Marine Corps as a young adult, gravitated to the corporate world, did a bunch of interesting things in big corporate companies, and then ultimately, started getting into the world of technology and cybersecurity stuff, and then traveled all over the world, doing very cool cybersecurity stuff, and then ultimately led it into my own kind of, let's call it, personal development reset for now. And then ultimately got to this interesting place where I was like, really what Neal Conlon focuses on in life is providing and creating safety and security for others. I don't care whether it's digitally, physically, emotionally, mentally, in person. Like, that's really been what my journey's been about. My journey's been about providing, security at a purpose-driven, patriotic, military, protecting our country, from the rest of the world, all the way to working with cybersecurity companies to protect people on the internet who don't realize how the internet really works and what the risks are that are there. And then evolving it even more so into you know, coaching people um, on mass feminine polarity stuff and running men's retreats and even doing deep inner plant medicine spiritual work. But at the end of the day, what I've learned over time is that I've become this reflection of people, because here's the thing is like you are a a blonde haired woman that has a very different level or understanding of what it feels to be safe in your environment, whatever the environment is. I'm 5'11", 230 pounds, Marine Corps veteran, bearded, tattoos, loud voice, and very forward. And so the reason why I feel safe and secure everywhere I go is it's mental, it's physical, it's spiritual, it's emotional. I feel safe wherever I go. And so I've created this lifestyle now that is a mix of online community and advisory work and coaching work and speaking on how do people make sure that you feel safe and secure wherever you are. Because the things that we crave in life, right? If you go to if you ever went to a concert, I always think about it like this. If you ever go to a concert and you're having a real what you're not paying attention to is like the reason why you're having such a great time is because you feel safe in that environment. Like there's enough security, the environment is welcoming, right? There's like all these assets that go on around you that if you're having a really great time, you never even notice that they're there. And yet, if anyone ever been to a conference where it got out of hand, there was fights, there was too much drugs, there was all these different things that go on. It ultimately is because those assets were not put in place in the right way. And so I've been very like you can't enjoy joy if you don't feel safe and secure. You can't enjoy sex in your life. You can't enjoy happiness. You can't like really enjoy anything if you don't feel safe and secure. And if you look at what's going on in the world today, politically, financially, media wise, a big piece of why people are so anxious and so frustrated and so mad is just because we don't feel safe and secure enough in our environments, and therefore we're just kind of acting out. And so it's kind of become my, I'll say, like life's purpose to always make sure that everyone around me and everybody in my community and everybody I work with feels as safe and secure as possible. I just don't care what that modality is, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's spiritually, whether it's emotionally, physically, whatever it is. I don't care. I'm going to do my part in making people feel safer.
So I ton of thoughts have bubbled up with that, but one that I want to start with is going to take us further back because we've learned about how Neal has evolved as an adult, but I think a lot that shows how we've gotten here is also reflected in who we were way back in the day as a kid. So I can't well, it's hard for me to say, oh, as a kid, you were like, I want to make sure people are feeling safe in whatever modality that is. When you think back, who was young Neal? You know, when you think to 5, 7, 10-year-old Neal, what was it that was your outlet? What really got you excited at that age?
You know, I, I don't know if I'd use the word excited, and I'm very grateful for the fact that like I had a pretty decent childhood. Like decent is like I grew up very privileged. You know, I had my parents divorced when I was super young, but I had great grandparents. Was a troublemaker because I was acting out because I had just too much to say and not enough of the right tools to say it.
Mm.
And so I was kicked out of two schools before I was 16. Um, you know, and ultimately was just like had always been this kind of like bull in the china shop
Mm.
personality, very forward, very generative, uh you know, hence why I've built this brand over the years now, which fundamentally like makes sense, um, about, which is press forward. And it's funny because now, as a 44, about to be 45-year old, successful entrepreneur, multiple business things, all the things going on, I'm like, all that stuff when I was a kid makes complete sense.
Mhm.
Like, if and I just kind of look back at it as like, I've really just been able to look back at that and recognize that if it wasn't for the fact that my parents divorced when I was so young, I wouldn't have felt like I needed to act out that way. If I hadn't been kicked out of the schools when I was acting out, I wouldn't have, been so rambunctious. If I hadn't been so rambunctious and so unhappy with my current state when I was in high school, I wouldn't have joined the United States Marine Corps. If I hadn't been in the Marines and recognized that I wanted something even greater in my life than serving in, one of the greatest purpose driven things you could ever do in your entire life, I wouldn't have left the Marine Corps and gone into the corporate world. And it just kind of builds up, right? I think one of the biggest challenges that people who feel drawn to evolving is like, historically, our society rewards people on their ability to groundhog day their lives. They have to be able to get up every day, get good at one thing, maybe two things, maybe three, and then literally do those things every single day until you get to a point where you can't do them anymore, and that equals some form of retirement. And throughout this journey, like, I've thought about this for a long time now, especially as you get a little bit older, you start to really think about the different stages of life. And I fundamentally preach to people, and I don't care whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it is. You can even be in your teens. I don't know if you could process it in your teens, but I tell 30-year-old people and people in their 30s, you have a responsibility to 40-year-old version of yourself to not have 20-year-old problems when you're 40. And then you have a responsibility to your when you're in your 40s, you have a responsibility to your 50-year-old self not to have the problems of a 30-year-old. Because when you turn 50, it's going to catch up with you. And I've just had so many people come into my coaching world that are like in their 40s and 50s. And I say, and I don't know if you ever worked with a coach before, but when you work with a coach, the coach is going to be like, all right, what do you want to work on? What are your obstacles? What are this? And I cannot tell you, it's got to be like 60 or 70% of the people that come to me with coach looking for coaching, when they paint this picture of it, that they're in their 40s and 50s and they want to work on something, want to improve their lives in some way, shape, or form, it is almost always that they're working on problems of 20s and
Mhm.
they should have resolved in their 20s and 30s. And I've just watched too many people in their 60s and 70s still have the unresolved problems of 20 and 30-year olds. And then by that point, you're just too old to resolve those things. And if you ever look at, and as people listen to this, if you look or think about that great aunt or uncle or parent or whatever that's kind of crotchety, just kind of sits there like frustrated at the world, you know, the reality is that there's something that when they were 25 they couldn't resolve it, and it just kind of anchored in, and then they just got curmudgeony for the rest of their lives about it. And I kind of have a personal mission to myself to be like the happy grandfather that everybody looks forward to going and seeing.
I think there's so much power in that because you're right. We start going through the motions, and I talk a bit about the hindering habits versus the healthy ones. And it seems to parallel what you've talked about with mental fitness. And hearing your story, it's very clear that you have become what you needed. And I think that's very true for a lot of entrepreneurs. We look back and we're like, where the hell was this person? But now it's that turn to give back and say, now I get it. I see it. I've experienced it. So as you support people with the coaching and the mental fitness, where would you say you really are seeing the biggest need? And whether that's with masculinity or not, I hear a lot about, as you're talking, I go to id, ego, superego, and I feel like you're trying to get people to tap back into that, the very basic understanding of thought, and then processing that thought and the actions we take and being more aware of them. So can you talk more to the mental fitness piece and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Right, I've kind of built, something that I needed at the time, and as I think one of the things that men don't realize, especially, right? I think it's starting to change a little bit, but we're taught to suppress our emotions at a very, very young age, right? And we're taught to kind of quote unquote man up. And I think there's a lot of value to that, actually. I think that men, in my opinion, should be taught to be strong in that way, not by itself, but they should be taught like those things. And a big piece of that really ties into, while I'm a huge fan and an advocate of, you know, empathy and mindfulness and gratitude and all those type of words, um, the the rest of the world is not. And so I think that there's this big misunderstanding about like what masculinity really is in the world today. Because if I was, and not to make it too like patriotic for a second, but if I was another country in our world and I was watching some of the this conversations around toxic masculinity in this country, you just have to kick back, eat some popcorn, and wait till the United States has, literally ruined men who want nothing more than protect their families and their country and their culture and all these things. And then some other country's going to start a war that we don't have the men that are prepared for that. And it's just something that people really need to think about, because you can't live in this, dystopian unicorn, everybody loves everybody world when everybody doesn't do that. And I think it's like just an important thing that people need to be aware of, that we get all wrapped up in social media and we get wrapped up in the words people are using. And the reality is that when we're not paying attention, there are countries and people in this world who would do nothing more than take everything that we have in a minute when we let our guards down.
Yeah.
And and it's hard because, as a military veteran who's had to transition back into the real world, it was a struggle for me to step into actually admitting that I had a mental health problem at one point. And because when people talk, when the story that I had around mental health is that, even the way I just said that, right? Mental health problem, right? It is ingrained in our society through pharmaceutical stuff and the way that we treat the problem versus the reality. And I think that like 2020 really did an amazing job of opening up this conversation, because every single person was like stuck in their house. And so what happened when you were left alone? Everybody had to deal with their own stuff. And then, depending on where you were in the world, everybody kind of suffered together in some way, shape, or form. And what happened from that? People felt anxious. People felt disjointed. People felt disconnected. And the crazy thing for me was that during COVID, I loved it.
Mhm.
I felt really, really guilty at the time. I feel guilty for saying that sometimes because I know it doesn't land well with people. But 2020 was great for me the whole year. And as the whole COVID thing was evolving, I started to really think about why. Why was it different for me? And I started to really pay attention into the fact of it was because my mental fitness was different. And not that I had done anything special, but for 2018 2019, I had been on this personal development journey. I'd been doing Tony Robbins events. I'd been doing plant medicine. I had been meditating. I'd been spending a lot of time alone. I'd be doing all these things. And so the whole rest, I mean, I remember like 2019, end of year, like everybody was like, this is going to be the craziest, most awesome, best year yet. We're on a roller coaster. It's going to be amazing. And then it wasn't. And so I've really kind of stepped into this idea about like mental health is just all garbage, in my opinion. But mental fitness, right? Doing the repetitions, having a practice in place so that you are, as prepared as possible for the things that come your way. It's no different than going to the gym. It's no different than training for an Ironman. It's no different than, learning to play a sport. You just have to look at your mind as a muscle versus just a repository that keeps information for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mental health is definitely an issue across the world. It's something that everybody has had an inkling of navigating, whether they've realized it or not. But what you just said is absolutely true. The mental illness, mental health, whatever we want to call it, that's a thing. But the mental fitness is what you're doing about it. What are your daily habits? I might have a day where I'm completely tapped, but there are certain things I have to do because otherwise I am setting myself up for failure. I know it. Getting up, working out, having the water, all these different pieces, they help guide you to be more mentally fit. Now, within that, you mentioned Tony Robbins and doing some of that. I find that my proximity to people is a huge catalyst to my mental fitness. And it's unfortunately been a number of times where I've had my personal board of directors has actually not had my best interest. And I've learned the hard way, failed partnerships and business, all that. Would you say that there have been people that you've connected with that have given you that proximity that has enhanced the mental fitness? And how do you suggest people find and navigate that when they realize those people I thought were my friends are not out for that wellness that I need?
I love this. Love the fact that you have a board of personal directors. I'm a huge advocate of it as somebody who's done a lot of great things in business. You look at a board of directors in a business, and then you realize that a lot of times the reason why the CEO of that company can move so seamlessly is because he's got the sponsorship and of the board directors, right? And so I forget who originally started talking about having your personal board of directors, but I think it's a very, very powerful thing. The thing that I've learned over the years, to answer your question directly in a pointed way, is the reality is, I think it's a tough conversation, but I think people who really want to ascend, be more successful at life, play life more full out, whatever words you want to use, need to realize that life is a lot more transactional than people realize. And in a board of directors at a company, there is the CEO has painted a picture to a board of directors of here's my goal, here's my purpose, here's my intention. And then it becomes, what can you do for me? And then that board member or that potential board member is going to paint a picture. I can give you sponsorship. You can use my name. I can give you introductions. I can help you get investment, whatever the things are. And then in exchange for that, the CEO will give options or equity to the company. And then therefore, there is a mutual transaction that has to occur. And I always say to people, because there's like this surge of things going around now where, people in their 20s are coming out of college and not sure about their careers. for some, I've been seeing a lot online, people are like, it's time for you to get a mentor. And then people are like, how do I get a mentor? And the
Mm.
funny thing is that like most people, if someone sent me an email and they were like, well, not me, but if someone sends an email to someone else and they were like, I saw you on social media and I'm looking for a mentor. Would you mentor me? And the mentor probably goes, yeah, sure, I'll mentor you. But then, like you're talking about, when the person needs someone to show up for them, they're too busy, they're working on something else, life happens, whatever it is. And so, even with my coaching, I always say to people, like, if it's not about the money for me at all, like it is about the financial transaction that a person is willing to make in order for them to invest in themselves to make the change. And for anyone who's thinking about creating a personal board of directors, you just have to have some kind of transaction take place. It doesn't have to be money, right? It could be some other thing. I've got an Ironman coach right now who is helping, who's going to coach me through my Ironman that I'm running, and in exchange, I'm going to coach him on building a brand, and we have an equal exchange going on. So therefore, we're both kind of on the hook for it.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because without it becoming too corporate, when you think of board of directors, you really do need that diversity and thought. And it can be so much as a tit for tat, we're giving each other a mutual value in something totally different. I embrace the financial insights. I embrace those that have more of the marketing brain. I also embrace my weirdos. I am a full advocate that you need some weirdos and you need some humor within your board to lighten the load when things get a little heavy, because it is not easy. So, as you have connected with people, I want to make sure that we acknowledge all that you have created and what you're creating now. So, what is it that you are really digging into at this moment? You mentioned you've got some physical pieces. What is it that you're experiencing or expanding within your business now?
Yeah, I appreciate the question there. 2022 has been. I always say to people, 2020 was the best year of my life. 2020 is the best year of my life. 2022 even better,
Hmm.
and 2023 will be the best one yet. Like that is fundamentally how I operate. And what that turned into is, 2020, I was already doing some coaching. I started running men's retreats throughout COVID. Then 2021, we started to integrate plant medicine into some of the retreats, um, because we're on this kind of renaissance of plant medicine now. Um, and we have microdosing programs and all kinds of stuff related to microdosing. And then 2022 started coaching in the Fortune 500 space. And so 2023 is just going to be more. And so there is a bunch of different retreats going on in 2023. The first one is at the world's most dangerous hotel on the planet. Um,
Okay, you have to like clarify. I'm thinking, wait, what? I didn't know that's a thing, and second, you just casually say world's most dangerous. Come on, people! Why wouldn't you want to show up?
well, here's the thing that I think is interesting for me in my own journey, and tie back to that is like I love the fact that if you are looking anything that anybody is looking for today is available on the internet. I don't care what anybody says. I say this to my daughter all the time. You want to learn how to make $1 million? You just got to Google it. Somebody will have posted a spreadsheet with a P&L that will show you exactly how to do it. You want to learn how to automate your Amazon and do what they call now an FBA process. There are people who sell it to you online. They'll give you the whole entire thing. Then you got to do the work. right? You want to learn how to have a happy relationship? Just Google it. It's there. You want to learn how to run an Ironman, like I'm running Ironman next year? I literally downloaded a spreadsheet that gave me the training plan for 9 months. Now you got to do the work.
Yeah.
And what I've learned over time through my own coaching and through my programs is that's my skill set. My skill set is doing the work, and my skill set is helping those do the work. I'm not going to build you a spreadsheet. I'm not going to give you a map. I will be the compass, and I will bring you a compass that you can do that with. And so through that experience, I've got all these people that have now come along on this journey, and I have like a fiduciary responsibility to keep on my journey and to give people other things, right? So at this, it started as just, doing men's retreats at my home. Then it evolved into renting Airbnbs and doing big men's retreats. And then now there's this big, beautiful surge of men all over the country doing men's retreats. And you can go anywhere and do a cold plunge and do breath work and write some notes and stuff like that. But I think that men, in my opinion, have a responsibility to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think that the where we build mental fitness is by pushing those norms. And so as I started to think about it a couple of months ago, I thought, how do I push the envelope for myself? So run an Ironman next year, the full 140.6. 2023 is my theme for the year is about consistency. And then we've got about 6 retreats scheduled for next year. And the first one being that there is an oil rig called the Frying Pan, which is 28 miles off the coast of North Carolina. And in April, myself and 15 other men will be helicoptered to this oil rig, and we will stay there for 2 nights, 3 days. Shark infested waters, coral reef below you. And when they drop you off, you are there until they come back and get you a couple of days later, no matter how the weather turns out.
That is
and
awesome.
and it's like, I mean, granted, because of my military background, I'm drawn to excursions like that. Mm-hmm. But it's like one of the things that I've really pay a lot of attention to especially men in our country. I think women have this problem too, just to be honest and fair. But it's like the problems that we have are not real problems. We need bigger problems to solve. There's no lions, pack of wolves, tribes coming, hunting us down. There's no looking for water anymore. There's no, like, our biggest problem is deciding whether or not there's sunflower oil in the oat milk or not. Like, I mean, right. Like, and then we get stressed out about that. So mm-hmm. I want to provide experiences where I take people past their thresholds just a little bit, just enough so they can experience humility and gratitude, so that when they go home, they don't really care about the oat milk or the almond milk or get frustrated about it. And that to me is mental fitness.
And that's exactly what you were saying before. We're so safe in ways that we aren't even recognizing. That for me, 2020, my year, that was a year of perspective. And one of those big perspective shifts was recognizing where I was being compliant with life versus shaking things up and realizing it was within my control. And we don't recognize those controllables. We think that it's out of it. If the almond milk gets tainted, oh my gosh, the world's going to end. Well, control the controllables. We have to stop and reflect on that. So I love that you're doing that. I want to make sure that we acknowledge you even more so and celebrate. My 3 big pillars are connecting, creating, and celebrating. And so I want to finish up by celebrating you. First of all, thank you again for joining. But I want to flip the script and ask you, what is it about Neal that we should be in celebration of? Because I could go on and on of all the things you've said and that you're doing that I value. But when you think about yourself and where you are now, what can we celebrate with you?
Ooh, plot twist. I like it.
Ah, ha, ha. Tapping into that mental fitness. Let's go. No.
Y- Um, I think one of the things that I really love to celebrate is uh is my 11-year-old daughter. And she is probably my biggest teacher, my biggest advocate. And if I'm to be honest, right, like I've got three children in total. And um and I and I didn't have the opportunity to be as great of a dad to the other two as I've gotten the opportunity to have with my youngest daughter. And I will oftentimes refer to her as my redemption child. But I just, as a man, as a white man who grew up on the East Coast, in the United States, um, I think a lot of people, like a lot of guys, get a lot of crap for the way that they behave in their lives. And and the reality is that a lot of us, in my past, I was one of those guys. We just don't know any better, and it's not on purpose. It's not intentional. It's We just can't relate. We're disconnected from the things. And so when my youngest daughter, Julie, who's now 11, was like 4, 5-ish, and she started to evolve from being this little chubby baby, like every kid is, into this little woman. um, it really changed my perspective and changed the way I thought about women in the world and what they need, and how men need to show up differently, and who I needed to be. And it was very, very powerful transformation for me. And um and I really do like celebrate that little girl all the time. There's a lot of like misunderstandings in this world about like divorced parents, and how you know 50-50 splits, and like scheduling and all these things. And I'm fundamentally changing that, because one of the things I celebrate with my daughter is, you know we have a rating scale in our emotions. And so I will always, if I go a couple days without seeing her because I'm traveling or whatever, I'll call her and I'll say, Julie, let me ask you a question. She's like, what, Dad? I'm watching TV. She's at that pre-tween age where she
Oh,
can't be
yeah.
bothered because anime is on or something like that. And I'll be like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love your dad? And she'll be like 50. Goodbye. And I'll be like, all right, wait, before you go, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think your dad loves you? And she'll be like 1,000. She's like, bye. But like that kid, I've done it with that child for her whole entire life. Like she's going to be annoyed when she's like 30 years old and I ask her that question in front of her boyfriend. Um,
No, she'll
because I'm
love
going
it.
to do that. But,
Absolutely.
but I celebrate that child, and I celebrate all my children, and I celebrate the work that I've done, knowing where I've come from.
Yeah. Makes me think of something I saw you share recently. And it was the best way. I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially, men, you can't go and fix the woman. You can't go and fix her. You ultimately have to fix yourself. And that was very powerful, because I think everybody, men and women, all need to reflect on that work, that the the true way to support others is by supporting ourselves. So thank you so much for what you're doing to really get out there and help people, especially the ones that like that fringe experience, because as you said, you can learn everything out there. There's an interest for everybody. 15 people are going to be heading out to that dangerous hotel. And so if you are somebody that you think you have a wild idea, there's others that will value it. So thank you, Neal, for proving it. One final thought from you is the question I love to ask. What is it that you think people could unlearn today? I think we are so stuck in going through habits that we forget that we need to unlearn them and get back to the basics. What is something you want people to unlearn?
Oh, I love this question too. I think people really need to unlearn. Um, Actually, I'll say it like this: a long time ago, when I was evolving my learning around my own self worth, um, I guarantee you, most people, if you ask them what your time is worth per hour, they're going to look at their job, they're going to have their rate, and they may throw 10 or 15 or 20 bucks on top of it. And so then if I ask somebody who's working, what's your time worth? Oh, it's $50 an hour, $60 an hour, $100 an hour, whatever it is. And that's a really tough uh, question for people a lot of times.
Mm.
And when I was unlearning my own self-worth, the person who taught me about it said, how much would it cost? What would you want to charge for somebody to call you at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night and say, I need you to come into the office now? And you come up with that number. And then whenever you are doing something, let's just say you're volunteering, let's just say, you're helping a friend out, whatever it is, doing the thing that you love, you learn that all you're really doing is that you're discounting your time because there's a value in that transaction beyond money. Mm. And the sooner that more people learn how valuable their time is, the better they'll spend it.
Yep, you are spot on. Well, I value your time. I want to make sure you can get back to all your fun travels. So, Neal, where can people connect with you from here? Where would you say reach out to you?
Yeah, I appreciate the time today as well. So thank you very much for that. On social media, most of my social media channels are at I am Neal, Neal Conlon, Conlon. And my website is www.nealconlon.com.
Awesome, Neal. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Keep pressing forward.
A lot of times, the thing that we think we are working on is not the thing we end up working on. That statement really resonated with me. It is important that we remember that it is okay to end up in a very different place than you initially set out for. Goodness knows I have over and over again. That is part of the personal growth experience. We learn more and we do differently. If not, well, isn't that what Albert Einstein said about insanity? Was there a part of this that really resonated with you? Let me know or reach out to Neal. I know that he would love to hear from you as well. Likewise, share this episode with that person that came to mind as you were listening. Sometimes it's that nudge from others that sets us up for our next greatest success. Likewise, please be sure to rate and review the show, because those ratings and reviews are what help get these conversations in front of others that are looking for that spark of inspiration. Thank you for joining us today, and as always, be well, stay curious, and we'll see you real soon.
Did you know that you burn more calories sleeping than you do watching TV? Wow!
Later, Tater.